coming up. Of all of the great Allied pilots that flew in the Second World War, the highest scoring of them all would be Is Kuzdub. This famous Soviet ace would be the deadliest pilot that the Luftwaffe would ever face, and he would finish off the war with more than 60 kills. But there is one incident involving this renowned pilot in the final weeks of the war that would be one of the most bizarre in history. In this video, we will take a look at the mission in which the highest scoring Allied ace of World War II was supposedly forced to dogfight with American P-51 Mustangs. One question that I often get asked when making these history videos is, TJ, how do you have time to edit, do all the research, and make all this great content? And the answer is, I am big on saving time and efficiency. And one of my favorite time savers is actually the sponsor of this video, Blinkist. Blinkist helps you discover and understand powerful ideas from books and podcasts in a short amount of time. Basically, they take great nonfiction works on all sorts of topics and condense them into 15-minute explainers called Blinks. This is huge for people like me who have busy schedules because it allows me to learn and discover things that I normally wouldn't be able to. Lately, being the history buff that I am, I have been into a few titles that they have condensed on some of my favorite historical topics, with my most recent being Killing the Rising Sun, the story of how America rose to the occasion in the Pacific theater of World War II. So, if you're like me and want to grow your understanding and knowledge on all sorts of topics in 15 minutes or less, I encourage you to check out Blinkist. Use the link in the description below to get a 7-day free trial and 25% off a premium membership. And best of all, it supports TJ3 History. Thanks again to Blinkist, and without further ado, enjoy. Is Kuzdub is perhaps the greatest Allied fighter pilot in the Second World War, and if one was to judge this based solely on kill tally, he would be without question. This famous airman would join the Red Army in 1940 and quickly excelled in training, but in the coming year, Germany would invade his home country and he would be subsequently sent to the front lines to fight. By 1943, he had mastered the new LA-5 fighter and was very comfortable in the air. He opened his kill tally in July of that year by taking down a Junkers Ju-87 Stuka and never looked back. Over the next year and a half, he would be a menace to Luftwaffe pilots far and wide as he consistently racked up his kill count. After achieving his first 20 victories, he would be awarded Hero of the Soviet Union for the first time in 1944. He would also establish another claim to fame in February of 1945, when he actually became the first Soviet pilot to take down an Me-262 jet aircraft. On this day, him and his wingman were on a free hunt when they spotted the Messerschmitt at a low altitude. Here, Kuzdub would bring down the German aircraft after it had been spooked by tracers from his wingman. But with all of this on his resume, perhaps the most interesting moment would come on April 17th of 1945. It was common for Kuzdub to go on solo patrols during this time, as the war was all but won, and many veterans like himself enjoyed flying on their own. So, on this day, he was flying alone and at a high altitude when he came across a group of American B-17 Flying Fortresses and P-51 Mustangs on a bombing mission. The entire flight was fiercely under attack from Luftwaffe fighters, however, and he could see an intense battle raging. Just a few moments later, as he watched the encounter, likely waiting for an opportunity to strike at any German stragglers that tried to escape from the battle, something bizarre happened. As one can see, the aircraft that Kuzdub was actually in looked fairly similar in shape to that of the German Focke-Wulf 190. And considering that Kuzdub's fighter was also painted gray during this time, it is certainly understandable that these two planes could be somewhat confusing in the heat of battle. According to Kuzdub, two of the American P-51 Mustangs mistook his LA-7 fighter for a German Focke-Wulf 190 and began to attack him. Despite him having a blaring red star on the side of his aircraft, the American pilots fired away, but unfortunately they did not know whom they were shooting at. Kuzdub tried to shake his tails and signal to them that he was not his enemy, but his attempts were in vain as the attacks continued. After assessing the situation, he came to the grim conclusion that he had no choice but to fight back at the Mustangs. Immediately, he turned his plane and went from a defensive strategy to offense, quickly outflying the Mustangs and coming up behind the first of the two. Regrettably, he opened fire and watched his machine guns hit the first aircraft, which immediately broke apart and went down towards the ground. Less than a minute later, he had the second of the Mustangs in his sights and opened fire. He struck the second Mustang, which took heavy damage as well, before the pilot was able to bail out and pull his chute below. Immediately following this, the Soviet hero turned for home, not wanting to get caught in another fray with the Americans. Upon landing at his base, he told his superior officers what had happened. This event would later on become the focus of great debate as to whether or not the authenticity of Kuzdub's claims were indeed accurate. The only supporting evidence of this encounter is in fact from the Russian side of the engagement, and most sources agree that the US Army Air Force records aren't necessarily clear on supporting this. The Soviet ace, however, always stood by his claims that it did indeed happen, even writing about it in his autobiography. Film footage has been touted that is supposedly from Kuzdub's fighter on this mission, but even its authenticity is questionable, as it was shot using Zeiss equipment, which was used primarily by the Luftwaffe. Because of this, and the fact that he did not have a wingman to verify the engagement, the kills were never verified. According to some sources, there was an American pilot around this time that stated that he was shot down by a Focke-Wulf 190 with a red star painted on the side. Whether or not this eyewitness testimony actually occurred, we will likely never know. But just 2 weeks after this strange battle in the skies over Europe, Germany would surrender and the war would end for the Soviets. These 2 kills of the American Mustangs were not counted in his final tally of victories, but one of his commanding officers supposedly told the famed pilot that he could save them and count them in the war to come, showing how much the Russians expected to soon go to war against the United States. Today, the encounter is very much still debated, and some have even claimed that it was completely fabricated for propaganda purposes. But others still say that it did indeed occur. If it did, this dogfight was without a doubt one of the most bizarre air battles in the skies of the Second World War. Thank you guys so much for watching this historical recreation. If you want to support my content, please check out my fan store here and make sure to click subscribe right here. And if you want to go above and beyond, feel free to support me on Patreon, which can be found in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.